Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 103 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Wiley, and today's episode is on how can success change your personality. This is a really great episode and I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking even more forward to doing today's episode. It's a great episode. I really enjoyed it because it really does show how behaviour and psychology is not just like a one-way direction, because yes, success can affect our personality, but our personality can affect success as well. So this is a great episode. I really enjoyed it. And it is Friday the 23rd of July 2021 as I record this, and that's actually quite a scary thought that by next Saturday there'll only be 5 months left of the year. That actually is really scary. Okay, so moving on to psychology news section. So we're in from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one I absolutely love. People tend to believe that psychology is a feminine discipline. Despite the fact that psychology students are more likely to be women than men, and that women outnumber men in the clinical psychology workforce, women in psychology publish less, receive fewer citations, and are underrepresented as senior positions within university departments. This juxtaposition of over and under representation poses an interesting question about how people perceive gender roles within the field. This question is explored in a new study in the Journal of Social Psychology. The team finds that people associate psychology more strongly with femininity than masculinity, and this may affect how men and women feel about working and studying in the field. I completely agree about this because, let's face it, I really do consider psychology to be more feminine than a masculine field. So that's mainly because I am a clinical psychology person, by a background. But the thing is, though, is that in clinical psychology, as the article said, there is so many more women compared to men. And out of all the most psychology facing the public, I don't know if that made any sense. But when people think about proper psychology, not profiling, they tend to think about clinical psychology and mental health, and a lot of them are women. So that's definitely why people tend to think that psychology is a more feminine. But also, though, it comes back down to the stupid stereotypes that men don't show emotions, men aren't allowed to show their emotions because it makes them look weak, and all of that rubbish. Oh, that is just so stupid. And because of that, and because women are supposed to be emotional wrecks, so even though that's another stupid stereotype, that's why people tend to believe that psychology, which is to do with emotions, is a lot more geared towards women. So all of it's based on very stupid stereotypes, and it really does need to be addressed. So moving on to another one. People in positions of power are more likely to blame and punish others for poor performance. Having a choice mindset, believing in short that people's behaviours are choices or deliberate actions driven by their own motivations and preferences, has multiple benefits. Those with a choice mindset feel as if they have a control over their own destiny, for example, and seeing better outcomes in negotiations. There are some drawbacks, however. Choice mindsets can lead to victim blaming, a lack of care about inequality, and a reduced interest in acts of social good. And a new study finds that people in positions of power tend to adopt a choice mindset, which makes them more likely to blame others for their mistakes. And this really does remind me about ideology, because in my social psychology book I talk about mediocrity, which is basically an ideology which states that people who are at the top, they deserve to be, and the people who are at the bottom deserve to be at the bottom and not the top. And it all comes back to the ideology. Inequalities are just an excuse by the lower people to try and criticise the top. So that's interesting, though. And a choice mindset, I can definitely see the benefits, but as we all know from psychology, from pretty much every single field of psychology, behaviours aren't necessarily choices. The mindset's wrong. Yes, there are some good benefits, but it's definitely not perfect. And then the last one is editor's pick. Bronze medalists really happier than silver medalists. That's a really hard word to say quickly. Insights from the 2016 Olympics, and of course today is the opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics. It'd be interesting to watch that to see what happens in terms of COVID. To win a medal of any kind at the Olympic Games takes years of training, hard work, and sacrifice. Standing on an Olympic podium is widely regarded as the pinnacle of an athlete's career. Nonetheless, only one athlete can win gold, leading the number 2 runner-up medalist to ponder what might have been. Intriguingly, a seminal study from the 1992 Olympic Games suggests that this counterfactual thinking was especially painful for silver medalists, who appeared visibly less happy than a bronze medalist. The researchers speculated that this may have been because of different counterfactual thinking they engaged in, with bronze medalists being happy that they didn't come fourth, while silver medalists feeling sad that they didn't win a gold. But a study from 2019 challenges that initial eye-grabbing result that suggests that bronze medalists are happier than silver medalists. Saying medalists so many times is actually quite tiring. However, the result supports the idea that the nature of counterfactual thinking differs depending on whether athletes come second or third. This, I think, is a very interesting idea. Idea though, and this is a very timely article from Research Digest, because of course we've got Tokyo Olympics though, and it just shows the power of counterfactual thinking. And actually, the picture that they've got, it does show with the where the athletes at different levels of happiness and sadness. So very interesting. And as always, though, everything is worth researching. Oh, I didn't know I was actually going to say the last bit. Okay then. So that's enough psychology news section. Let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. So there hasn't been a lot of stuff going on, but this week, at least in terms of psychology, because I've mainly been doing fiction projects and some other stuff. But if you're on my email list, then you would have seen yesterday, as I record this, that I've started to research police psychology for a new forensic psychology book that I'm going to be doing soon though. So that is really, it's actually very, very surprising and it's actually quite paradoxical because so far, as I'm reading it, it turns out that people love the police and then the most highly regarded part of the criminal justice system. But equally, people aren't that sure on them, and they acknowledge that there's tons of problems with the police. And then there's that bit. But very, very interestingly, it actually turns out that there's a police culture, and the police culture is actually quite. It's very strange, and what it's basically all about though is that it basically goes into organisational cultures, workplace cultures. There's a lot of very good research that I need to do first because in the book I'm reading there's at least another 20 pages though, when I'll do some additional research. Research though, but these are 20 proper textbook pages. So any of you that have been to university, you know I'm talking about massive thick pages with 2 columns tiny text. So yes, this is going to take a while though, but I'm chipping away at it, and it should be in the next 2 weeks that I'll crack on with it, because I've got some of my other projects, so I'm just going to chip away at it and then I'll dive into it in about 2 weeks time though. And aside from that, there's actually nothing else psychology related that I've been up to this week. So as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, and you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you. And today's episode has been sponsored by Personality Psychology and Individual Differences. This is a great book that really does tie into today's episode. And if you enjoyed today's episode, you really have got to get this a great book, because it really does go into so much depth about personality psychology. Yes, how we classify traits, the 5-factor model, neuroticism, agreeableness, and the other things that we're going to talk about today. And also how does our personality change over time, and so many really great facets that I really, really writing about, especially though how our personality can affect politics and veganism and all of those great, very, very niche and very relevant topics. I really do recommend this book, and is always written in a great, really easy to understand way, and it's fun. Yes, because as we all know from university, psychology textbooks are not fun. This is not a textbook, this is a fun book that you actually want to read. So that is Personality Psychology and Individual Differences, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can buy the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon at your local bookstore or your local library if you requested. And that book will be released on the 28th of September 2021, but I really do recommend that you pre-order it. It's a great book, you really do not want to miss it. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at how success can change your personality. So we know that our personality can affect our behaviour in lots of different ways. And what I really like about personality psychology is that you can really see it in other people. Like if you think about it, you don't really need to dive into the person too much, because the personality is very surface level, if that makes any sense. Yes, I'm moving on to the actual content part. So the 5-factor model. So this was proposed by Robert McGunn and Paul Acosta last century. And the 5-factor model, in essence, proposes that humans have 5 basic personality dimensions, and the individual differences between people are down to the varying levels of these different dimensions, and all the other personality traits are like a different part of these personality dimensions. So what these personality dimensions are is that they're neuroticism, openness to experience, extroversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And throughout this blog post, I'm going to allude to what each of those are. So if we bring in success, so each of these factors, they're related to personality, but also personality can affect success because of these. So if we look at neuroticism first, so this personality dimension is related to how well people deal with stress and worry, and people high in this personality trait tend to have maladaptive strategies to deal with stress. And yes, this sounds a lot like a clinical psychology, and it is. And I was actually going to try and make this into a clinical psychology blog post too, or podcast episode, but I realised it would get a bit long there. So we're linking this to success. So people high in neuroticism don't tend to achieve very much in their career because their neuroticism hinders their abilities. But some people high in neuroticism can manage to achieve success because they learn how to suppress these tendencies to worry less and learn better management strategies so that they can deal with their stress and worry better. And also some facets of neuroticism include stuff like anxiety. So the general anxiety that we get about life and everything, that's to do with our levels of So the next one is openness to experience, and this actually has to be one of my favourite personality traits because I like to think I'm quite open to new experiences. So our next personality trait, so what this is all about is how willing people are to accept new ideas and experience new things, which means that this is absolutely brilliant for success because people high in this personality trait are much more likely to be successful and think outside the box to come up with new innovative solutions to the problems in their career, which in psychology we always need though, because we need to think about how will we help the people, how will we help our clients to help overcome their mental health difficulties. Extroversion. And this is where it actually gets quite interesting because you would have thought that extroversion would always lead to a success because extroversion, you're more outgoing, you're more of a people's person. And yes, that is true to some extent because at first this can lead to an increase in success. But over time, success can actually lead to a decreased levels of extroversion because researchers have suggested that this is because successful people may depend less on the social support of others, meaning that they have less sociable demands, and which I think is an absolutely horrible way to put that. So yes, my explanation is that, in other words, extroverts become successful with their ability to bond with people and they radiate so-called positive vibes. I was horrified when I read that in the article that inspired me for this post. Positive vibes, really? But when they get successful and let's say becomes a manager, there's a power shift. So the extrovert can't rely on other people anymore, potentially starving the extrovert of the energy that they crave, since extroverts tend to get their energy from other people. So I think it's very interesting, simply because it's not what you would expect. And then the next one is conscientiousness. And then after this, we've got one more personality dimension. So the whole thing about a conscientiousness is that it's related to a carefulness and a diligence. So people high in this personality trait, surprisingly, tend to be on lower incomes because these people tend to seek out conventional jobs, and these people tend to be less likely to ascend the career ladder, which I'm a bit surprised at because you would have thought though that a careful people and a really diligent people would be able to be punctual, would be a bit more outgoing, and they would have the necessary skills that in employers want to, so they might be able to get the higher income jobs. But surprisingly, that's not. But some people high in a conscientiousness, they do in a higher career position. But interestingly enough, after they achieve success, they aren't too interested in the little details, and resulting in success leading to a decrease in conscientiousness. So that I think is quite interesting, because the personality factor leads to a decrease in success, but then in the end, the behaviour of becoming successful, what can lead to a decrease in the personalities. That I thought was very interesting, and it's very interesting. And that's one of the great things about psychology, is that everything is sort of on its head. There's always so many great complex interactions going on though. Yes, that definitely keeps me interested in psychology. Then the last personality factor is agreeableness. And come on, I think we can all what agreeableness is about, because of the name. But this is where the research gets very muddy, because some research says that it's best to be nicer to others and pro-social to get ahead at work. But other research says it's best to be ruthless to ascend the career ladder. However, the general idea, and yes, this is extremely general, some people that are high in agreeableness tend to have lower starting salaries, but then they can ascend the career ladder with their pro-social side kicking in when they've raised to a position of power, because they no longer have to climb over anyone though. So personally, I really have enjoyed today's episode, because personality psychology is a great and really, really interesting area to study. Because personality psychology is filled with these great interactions, so where our personality can influence our behaviour, but then our behaviour can influence our personality. So there's so many great interactions that I really do enjoy learning about. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more about personality psychology, please check out Personality Psychology and Individual Differences, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback versions from Amazon, your local books or local library if you request it. And the book comes out September the 28th of 2021. And I really do recommend pre-ordering it. And if you know someone who would find today's episode useful, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help us spread the word about the podcast. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.